Hi folks, I thought I'd give you just a few more tips on helping to draw steps if you need to do it in one of your exam responses. Normally the only time you really need to do it is within a functional use of space exam, but you might need to show some steps to coming off a veranda or a deck if you're doing tropical design or an elevator building of some kind. But essentially I'm focusing on interior. So what I've done here, I've done something that I have done this in Rhino 3D to speed up the process because I didn't have my drawing gear at home and I didn't have my webcam, so hence I did it on this program. But essentially, I've set up like it might be an apartment style building, very much like our use of space. So if I go into perspective, you can see how it might look like this. So this surface here, that's representing a mezzanine floor, and that's representing the run of stairs that I've got attached to one wall. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the other view, this is what I call the front view port. Okay, and I'll explain to you how I work these out. So if I look up to this line here, this dimension here, 6,000 millimeters, that's my total run of my stairs. Now take note, I have not got those stairs going all the way to here because I wouldn't leave myself space to be getting onto the stairs. You don't want to be stepping onto the stairs from the side. You need a landing, a clear landing to get onto the stairs, as you'd need a landing at the top. So please remember that you must leave space, and that would be at least 1,200, 1,500 millimeters, whatever. This is known as your total rise. The individual parts here on the up, they're known as your stair rise, and these are known as your treads. They are a run, but they're really known as your treads on your steps, right? So how did I work out the number of steps? Well, what I did, I had to come up with a figure first, hence this figure over here of 160 millimeters. I went on the information that the average range of rise heights goes from about 150 up to about 190. Okay, so I thought, well, I want somewhere in between. I want a comfortable height for this domestic dwelling. All right, so once I ascertained that was the approximate height I wanted, I think, okay, I divide 160 into 3,000 millimeters, right? So that's remember, that's your mezzanine floor level there. So I divided this into that, and that gave me the number of stairs, which I worked out to be 19. So then I might have then done another really calculation, think, okay, if I want exactly 19 steps, I could divide that back into 3,000 and it might have given me a more accurate measurement again. But then I used this grid system here, and I'd be doing this in construction. So I would have measured in construction at 160 millimeters. Now, the advantage of doing this to 1 to 50, that would be pretty much the equivalent to 3 millimeters. Much easier to show that in 1 to 50 rather than 1 to 100, where it'd be a millimeter and a half. It'd be tiny. So 1 to 50 is a better scale to use for your section drawings. Okay. Now that I've done that, once I've worked out the number of steps, I then divide the number of steps into the total run. And that gave me the number of the actual distance, in this case 312 millimeters, for each of my treads. So I divided the number of steps into here, and this gave me 312 millimeters, and hence I then did this grid going the other way, so a series of lines, and you can see once they intersected, it was just a matter of going up like this, up and across, up and across, up and across. These do represent handrails, which I've got around about 950 to 1,000 millimeters in height. Okay, should always have handrails on the external side of your stairs, or that could be a glass panel with some writing on top. There's got to be some sort of safety rail here. The next scenario, I'm just going really quickly. The next scenario is where I've done pretty much in the same space, working in the same space, but this time I'm sort of saying, okay, well, I might have some furnishings here or whatever. I can't have the stairway going the whole length of the wall, which I virtually had before. So I'm going to shorten, I'm going to have an L shape. So this is looking down on top, and this is looking to the side. So how I went about doing this, I knew I had to have a landing. So if I go back to my perspective view, I've got to have two landings. This landing here is at the halfway point, and this one is at the top. Now, I would have railings on this, but this would be at the top where I'm stepping off the mezzanine onto the landing and then coming down the stairs, getting to this landing halfway, changing direction, and coming down to here onto the actual ground floor. Okay, so what do? So going back to this viewport, this is my halfway point, so that's 3,000 millimeters. This is my halfway point, so that's my mezzanine floor. Halfway point's 1,500. I've got my landing coming off here. And so because that's 1,500, I think, okay, I'm still working on that figure of about 160 millimeters. So I divided 160 into 1,500. It didn't work out quite evenly, so then it gave me a figure of 9, so I divided that back into that and I rounded it up, and then I came, well, the computer does it much more accurately, but I would have rounded that up to 167, for example. Okay, so again, once I know 167 and I've divided into 1,500, that gives me my number of steps, and I've done the same thing again. I've used a series of grids which I'd measure out and transfer those across in construction. And then, because I know the number of steps now by doing this count, I then divide that into the actual run, the total run. And here's my total run here, because I've already got this landing coming out to 900. All right? So that's the distance here, not to there, but between here and there. So I've divided the number of steps into 266, and that's giving me my distance of my individual treads. And then, so I've done these then, series of lines coming crisscrossing here at 230 apart. Again, use 1 to 50, and that's then allowed me to do this, go up to this one, and then it's just a matter of using the same dimensions, and I've pivoted this on the other side, but you can see how that then goes up to the other landing. So if it's halfway, it should be equivalent number of steps and equivalent spacing. All right, so you'd show that in one of your views. But just to see what I've done in three-dimensional view, you can see how I've done a series of, I've just pivoted this around to get that to join to that landing there. Okay, but you either show this viewport or you show this viewport. It's entirely up to you. So you'll be showing from the length or from the end. Okay, but you can see they look proportionally correct. But I'm just really indicating to you how you work out the numbers, and how from those numbers you can work out what heights and what your tread lengths are. The final scenario is if you're dealing with a much smaller building, but you still got some sort of steps that you need. So I'll just open up this one. And this is a scenario where it's like a tiny house, a really tiny house, so much smaller heights, okay? And so you can see the total height 4.3, so it's quite restrictive, whereas the other one was 6,000. So this is really more like a proper loft. A loft, you can have it in a house, but it's often in a bedroom space where you might have a loft for your bed, or you might have a little bit of an escape sitting area, bean bags or a little couch up there if you really want to. They do that in tiny houses too. But it's the same principle, but I've simplified it by not worrying about steps. You can have big blocky steps if you want to. And so they would be approximately, quite big rises. You could go for about 250 to 300 millimeters in height. So you're really pushing that height because it's for young people. It's not for old people like me or much older than me. You got to think about the demographic that would be using this. Okay, so anyway, I've just put a little step ladder, and these are 300 millimeters apart. And so you can see how, and that would be around about 400 millimeters in width. So you can see how I've just used a simple ladder to create a loft, access to a loft area that could be used for a bedroom, etc., or a small sitting area. But it's low headroom. I've maximized my headroom here. I could have had this a little bit lower again. Okay, that's about it. Thank you.